But the evidence of recent months suggests that they could be on the brink of becoming a nuclear weapons state far more powerful than Britain. Mark Urban, BBC News, Ukraine.
And you can see more of Mark Urban's report on Newsnight tonight at 10:30 on BBC Two. Cricket and Sussex and
Our base is at the centre of a bitter dispute between Russia and the Ukraine over who should control them.
From the former Soviet Union, an exclusive report will be going inside the buildings which for 20 years have hidden their secrets from American spy satellites. I'll be examining how political pressure, threats and the promise of billions of pounds have so far failed to persuade Ukraine to give up its slice of the Soviet nuclear arsenal.
And that they can block any order given by Moscow to launch nuclear weapons based in the Ukraine. And, as Newsnight's Mark Urban, the first foreign journalist to visit a Ukrainian nuclear missile base, now reports, Ukraine may now be within months of becoming an independent nuclear power itself. Mark begins his report in the missile fields of Russia, which is now in bitter dispute with the Ukraine over nuclear weapon policy.
The Rezhitsa Rocket Division's positions stand in mute testimony to the grim logic of nuclear deterrence. To accompany the divisional commander as he inspects his units is to receive a lesson in the power which the intercontinental ballistic missile still holds. The armoured silo hatch weighs more than 12 tons. Hydraulic power raises it to reveal the SS-17 missile within. If the button were pressed, this weapon could get to New York in 20 minutes. Its 4 warheads pack a nuclear punch equivalent to 40 Hiroshimas. Little wonder, perhaps, that the general and many others in the former Soviet Union mourn the treaties which will take away so many of these international status symbols.
A
civilized person can only get pleasure out of the destruction of the weapons if he's mad. And that's exactly what's happening now. It doesn't give me any pleasure, not because I disagree with nuclear disarmament. I believe that it's necessary. It's also an inevitable process.
We set off to find out how arms cuts are being implemented. In the woods halfway between Moscow and St. Petersburg lies one of the Russian silos already destroyed following the end of the Cold War. 3 tons of TNT broke it apart. Now, though, it's the aftershocks of the Soviet collapse which threaten further progress in cutting the Cold War armories.
This most powerful of weapons will soon be decommissioned under cuts agreed with the Americans. But a few hundred miles to the west, the nationalist-minded government of Ukraine is refusing to give up all of the nuclear weapons stationed on its territory. Increasingly, there's concern in Russia and the West that Ukraine might be intent on taking control of a substantial slice of the world's largest nuclear arsenal.
The aggressor should bear in mind that if they start a war, the Soviet armed forces will retaliate with a swift, crushing blow.
In the age of apparent Cold War certainties, Ukraine was second only to Russia in the Soviet family of nations. No distinction was made between them by the standard-bearer of the new right.
Let us be aware that while they preach the supremacy of the state, declare its omnipotence over individual man, and predict its eventual domination of all peoples on the earth, they are the focus of evil in the modern world.
The last great spasm of the Cold War saw deployments of a new generation of ballistic missiles. 130 SS-19s were placed in 2 groups, around 90 around Khmelnytsky and to the south at Pervomaisk. There, older silos were later filled with SS-24 missiles, making a total of 176 ICBMs in Ukraine. There were also 2 bomber bases. In all, about 1,800 nuclear warheads for strategic weapons in Ukraine, many more than Britain and France combined. Under the Soviet chain of command, missiles in Ukraine answered to the 43rd Rocket Army headquarters in Vinnytsia, and they got their orders from Strategic Rocket Forces HQ near Moscow. In Kiev, capital of Ukraine, the forbidding facade of the Prime Minister's office is a relic of the old Stalinist system. But now it houses people determined to stake Ukrainian national claims on the nuclear weapons left here, even if it antagonizes the West.
It is pointless trying to achieve results today by putting pressure on Ukraine, particularly as the political situation has been acutely aggravated.
Before he became Prime Minister, Mr. Kuchma ran Yuzhmash, one of Ukraine's biggest and most secret facilities. Today, its workers are busy learning how to make socially useful items like microwave cookers. But this plant's primary purpose was building ballistic missiles. Today, SS-18s, the biggest type fielded by the Soviet Union, lie useless in the workshops. SS-24s were also built here in the 80s. Ukraine has ample nuclear weapons know-how, which is why the West is so keen for it to keep to the non-proliferation and START treaties.
I believe our Supreme Soviet could have ratified this decision long ago if we all, including the US and other countries, had approached this matter sensibly. But what we hear is, if Ukraine doesn't do this, we won't give it anything.
At the beginning of this year, Presidents Bush and Yeltsin signed START 2, the second stage of heavy cuts agreed in the old superpower nuclear arsenals. Ukraine didn't sit at the top table with them, and Russia was signing a deal which it may never be able to deliver. In April, Ukraine raised its flag, taking what it called administrative control of the missile units. The officers and men found themselves being paid by Ukraine. The task of maintaining the missiles was becoming more difficult because of political disagreement. The base's officers maintained their duties, going underground to command posts. Ukraine said publicly that it still accepted Moscow had operational control, the ability to launch the missiles. Newsnight became the first Western team to go to Strategic Rocket Forces HQ in Moscow to hear how the formula adopted in April by Ukraine was a recipe for dispute.
It's called administrative control, but each side understands what is actually meant by that term in its own way. When the Ukraine decided to achieve its own control, the influence of Strategic Rocket Forces command on the state of these Ukrainian-based units was significantly reduced.
Newsnight has established that despite public acceptance of Moscow's operational control, officers at the Ukrainian Defense Ministry were working to undermine it. A secret group, codenamed Army Unit AO172, was set up to ensure that Ukraine could block any order from Moscow to launch the missiles. Work now publicly confirmed for the first time.
Our president laid down the conditions, posed the problem that under no conditions should the nuclear missiles be launched without the express permission of the president and government of Ukraine. And I must say that certain events have taken place, organizational and other events that give such an ability to our government that the nuclear weapons cannot be used from our territory without permission from our state.
If it's not technical, how would you describe it?
Yes, we do have this ability. It's guaranteed. More than that, I cannot say.
In May, Ukraine and two other former Soviet republics joined Russia and America in signing the Lisbon Protocol. In it, the Ukrainian government pledged to implement the arms-cutting START treaty and to obey the Non-Proliferation Treaty, thereby renouncing nuclear weapons. But at Russia's foreign ministry in Moscow, they soon realized that signing the Lisbon Protocol had changed little. Several agreements in principle to solve the dispute remain just that.
They are not signed as yet. Presently, we are waiting for the answer from the Ukrainian side regarding signing them. That's the situation. And every day I look at this telephone with the receiver lying in its place, hoping that a call from Kiev will come which would bring a positive reaction to these agreements.
Less than a month after Lisbon, Mr. Kuchma gave a secret speech to the Ukrainian parliament in which he advocated abandoning the commitment his country had just made. He said they should keep the 46 newest missiles, the SS-24s he had built, as well as the bomber-based weapons, at least for the time being. His argument:
What I said is that here we have to make not only a political decision, but an economic one as well. Because if we ratify this treaty, we lose all property rights on all the components the warhead consists of. We already have a bitter experience of passing on to Russia the small missiles warheads, and Russia immediately signed a deal with the USA for a large sum for the sale of uranium, and the Ukraine got nothing out of it.
Leonid Kravchuk, Ukrainian president, went to visit the Khmelnytsky missile base a few weeks ago. He's joined the national chorus, saying the bombs won't be given up unless Ukraine gets security guarantees and the price is right. We understand it's $3.5 billion. His visit was also intended to give the lie to alarming reports emanating from Rocket Forces HQ in Moscow about the state of the Ukraine-based missiles.
The necessary technical and maintenance work has to be carried out according to the instructions of the people who designed the weapons. It's not being carried out. It's being violated. The warheads that are taken off the rockets are being stored at the division's rocket technical area, and the numbers exceed the established limits.
The SS-19 weighs 90 tons. It's so big that it's broken down into 3 stages to move by road. Russian generals are now alleging not just that safety is being jeopardized, but that Ukraine, in breach of its public promises, may be able to gain full operational control over this armory within months.
We have information that work is being done in this direction, but we don't have exact proof. From the technical point of view, the existence of specialists in this field in Ukraine makes it possible to achieve control. It's possible within 8 to 10 months to have control over aiming and launching those missiles.
Our own request to Moscow and Kiev produced a special flight to Pervomaisk in southern Ukraine. We wanted to discover whether the weapons are safe, who is in control, and become the first Westerners to go there. To our surprise, we found Lieutenant General Kryuzhko on the flight with us. He's in charge of Ukrainian administration of the missiles. Russian intelligence suggests that he also runs Army Unit AO-172. If there is a secret Ukrainian project to create their own national nuclear force, he is most probably in charge. At the Pervomaisk base, we were shown conscripts limbering up. The general had melted into the background, and we learned that our filming plans were to be severely curtailed. Like the conscripts, we were going round in circles. While the wires were buzzing to Moscow and Kiev about whether we would be shown anything of consequence, we were asked to film the po-faced regimental pop group with their own message of telephonic harmony. After much debate, we persuaded the officers to show us more, and were taken by bus to one of the missile sites. On arrival, we went into a highly secure, closed hangar. Inside, even here largely covered, the first stage of an SS-19 missile. This is the first of several which Russia and Ukraine have agreed to dismantle. Special pumps and pipes being used to carry away the highly volatile liquid fuel. Among many issues unresolved, how to dispose of hundreds of tons of these dangerous substances. Despite this sign of progress, there's no agreement to ship back the nuclear warheads themselves to Russia. And the division's acting commander, paradoxically himself a Ukrainian, admitted that the political dispute was causing safety problems.
There is, in fact, a problem with the concentration of warheads, but it will, I believe, be resolved strictly in accordance with the agreement between the Russian and Ukrainian Defense Ministry. At the moment, though, the security of the warheads is guaranteed.
What future, then, for the soldiers of Pervomaisk? Little by little, Ukrainian influence is taking over the barracks. New signs are going up in the local language. Senior rocket forces commanders from Moscow are being refused permission to come here. Rightly or wrongly, the authorities there are drawing their own conclusions.
In general, what's happening looks worse and worse for the Non-Proliferation Treaty on Nuclear Arms and for the system of nuclear non-proliferation in general. This is absolutely clear. Already we can speak of the plain and obvious negative effect of this impasse on the field of international politics. The question arises, why did they pursue such a policy at all? Where does it lead? This is like a Pandora's box.
The decision to create national Ukrainian nuclear forces may already have been taken in secret, and the training of these troops may be part of it. For the moment, though, Ukraine bills itself as something different, the first of a new type of nuclear state, one which owns the weapons, but which claims not to aspire to having a system which would harness them as part of its national military power.
That was Mark Urban in Russia and in the Ukraine. In a moment, how Joy Gardner's death has added to a sense of alienation among the black community where she lived.
The release of John Demjanjuk until it considers fresh appeals against its decision that he should not face any new charges. Mr. Demjanjuk has already been cleared of being the Nazi concentration camp guard known as Ivan the Terrible.
Israel's legal system is still agonizing over the future of John Demjanjuk. Once again, the Supreme Court agreed with Demjanjuk's attorney, Yoram Sheftel, and rejected attempts to have Demjanjuk stand trial on new charges. Representatives of 8 groups who'd petitioned for a new trial were in court. One survivor of a death camp tore his shirt as a symbol of mourning for the dead. They believe that while not Ivan the Terrible, Demjanjuk may have been an SS guard at another camp. There was sorrow and threats when the court rejected their petitions for a new trial.
I feel a pain. I feel ashamed. If Demjanjuk will be released, we'll find a way to kill him in a short time.
Under strong emotional pressure, the court agreed to another delay until Friday to consider a last-minute legal challenge. Demjanjuk's family and lawyer had been hoping that he would be free in 24 hours. Yet again, they've had their hopes dashed. The Supreme Court will be aware that a majority of Israelis are said to believe that John Demjanjuk should face another trial. Given that, they want to be seen to have considered thoroughly every legal argument. But they'll also be aware that lengthy indecision about how to end this embarrassing episode will do their prestige no good either. John Devitt, BBC News, at the Supreme Court in Jerusalem.
An IRA card.
Ukrainian, Badoklev, 6th in the last Olympic Games. Best time this season, 47.82. Matete, the 400-meter hurdles World Championship final. Atkins went very quickly from the blocks.
Winthrop Graham is flying as well. He's cut the stagger a little bit back on Kevin Young. Down the back straight, it's Winthrop Graham. Matete, a solid start, but Young starting to stretch away slightly from Graham. Through the halfway stage, Kevin Young now closing on Diagana. 3 hurdles left. Off the bend is Kevin Young, the Olympic champion, Diagana, Winthrop Graham, Matete. And Kevin Young away and clear, 1 left. He's got it right, and Kevin Young, the Olympic champion, becomes champion of the world. And a photo finish right across the line for second place. 47-18. There, that's confirmed.
Going on around the stadium, and that marvellous run by Sally Gunn. We haven't had a chance to see much of the pole vault, but Sergei Bubka looks as though he could be on his way to a 4th consecutive world title. It's been a fascinating competition, and at the moment only Yegorov of Kazakhstan and this man are left in the competition. The height, 6 meters. Oh, he's got it, and he made it look easy. What a contrast to the qualifying competition of the Olympic Games last year. He's coming back into the sort of form that's brought him 34 world records, and he's hungry for this one. 6 meters. And Yegorov now has to go way above his lifetime best to stand a chance of staying with Bubka. In fact, he's got to go higher to win the gold medal. Absolutely perfect. With precision, with grace, with speed, and with a lot of strength. Bubka goes clear at 6 meters. So, Sergei Bubka, his form, well, a little indifferent coming into these World Championships, but you never can tell. And the man in the picture there, Grigory Yegorov of Kazakhstan, he surpassed himself today. He's in clear 2nd place, even if he fails this height. But a fascinating confirmed with the bronze medal, and he is actually tied with Trandenkov of Russia as well. They both cleared 5 meters 80. Yegorov has cleared a personal best of 5 meters 90, and now he's going into the stratosphere. He hopes alongside the great man. And so this pole vault competition will continue, that's for sure. But of course, if Yegorov fails, Bubka is out on his own. And he will have done what Carl Lewis couldn't do, which was to win 4 consecutive world titles. The history of World Championship pole vaulting has all been about Sergei Bubka. 5 meters 70 in 83, 585 in 87, and 595 in 1991. So that's 6 meters, a World Championship record. He's gone through the 20-foot barrier, of course, with his world record this year, 6 meters 13. And actually cleared 6:15 indoors. And there's Max Tarasov.
Silva of Brazil has been disqualified. We don't know why, but he's out of the final. Details later.
Also, some more details have come through about the women's qualification for high jump, because we felt that Olympic champion and Kostadinova, the world record holder, and there was a mix-up in terms of qualification this morning. Neither Heikki Henkel or Kostadinova cleared the qualifying height of 1 meter 93, but the IAAF decided that both would go through, as the 12 athletes had not reached and an equal world championship record at 6 meters. Total new territory for Yegorov. Well, he nearly kicked that high jump bar off the safety bed there, and so he'll have just 1 attempt left, but he is assured of the silver medal. And Tarasov and Trandenkov will get 3rd place. And of course, this event, like the men's hammer, being dominated by athletes from the countries which formed the former Soviet states. Now over in the discus 5 minutes ago by Sergei Bubka. Well, that means Yegorov goes out. Bubka is the champion once again. I'm almost sure we'll see Bubka go for new world record figures. But more importantly than that, he's won the World Championship now 4 times in a row, and nobody else has ever done that. Records indoor and out, 31 times over 6 meters. The world champion 4 times in a row. And now the pressure is off in terms of championship competition. Might just give him the relaxation he needs, the concentration, the focus he needs to go for yet another world record. He's been around for a long time, but he's still hungry for records and still hungry for more major medals. The most prolific record breaker in modern athletics history tries once more. Now then, something going on here. Is he being told that he's run out of time? He's the only competitor left in here, and so I just wonder whether that clock was wrong. Because the championship is over. He's going for a world record. And they shouldn't be doing this. The officials are actually wrong in this occasion.
Yeah, it really doesn't apply in the final stages of a competition when there's one man left and attempting a world record. That the decision, the championship won at 6 meters, and I think common sense may well reign, but it's upset his concentration quite clearly. Very, very angry, Sergei Bubka. I've never seen him as angry as that before. Very, very upset, isn't he? I mean, not being allowed to take the attempt for the benefit of the meeting. He's won it. He's got a championship record of 6 meters. He's done absolutely everything. The clock just doesn't apply.
And the crowd, quite rightly, feel robbed.
Well, I'm sure Sergei Bubka's argument will continue. During normal championship competition, they are allowed a time limit, and they have to compete inside it. That doesn't apply just at this moment in time when Bubka is the only man left. But I tell you what, in this mood, I wouldn't be going near him. He's really psyched up and has been psyched up throughout the pole vault final. But he's very, very cross now. So 2 attempts left at the new world record height for the new world champion.
Well, that all seems very ridiculous. What do you make of it, Daly?
Well, actually, what I think's happened is that they've carried down to 2 minutes, just like they do in normal competition. But I think when there's only one man left, you're actually given an extended amount of time because, you know, you're not actually keeping anybody up. And the other thing is, you're tired yourself.
They're actually getting the rules wrong, you think?
Yeah, I think they are. And if I was him, unless I was being paid some money, I'd pack up now and go home, just to teach them a lesson.
I mean, they're depriving the crowd and our viewers and everybody else of what could be a magical moment. It seems absolutely absurd.
The other thing is, it's not doing him any good. I mean, you know, he gets all agitated, angry and all that kind of stuff, and it doesn't help him perform.
Yeah.
I mean, even if he was actually to make it now, it's just wasted energy, which may have gone into another jump.
Well, it's not going to happen, clearly. But, of course, what did happen was that magical lap of running a short time ago. If you might have just got in, maybe you missed it.
About Bubka, the crowd supporting him entirely.
I suspect in a situation like this, David, that in fact the competitors know the rules far better than the officials themselves. They've done it all before. And Sergei Bubka telling the officials in no uncertain terms exactly how he feels. But I hope it won't detract from what has been a very fine pole vault competition. Over in the discus, Min of China is lying in 3rd place. One of the world's top throwers this year. And
well, Sergei Bubka then preparing, just looking at the scoreboard to see whether they've actually given him the vault back again. It's not absolutely clear from this angle. The scoreboard's not showing anything at the moment. It did show a second attempt at 6 meters and 14. But they have, on the official computer here, they have got a failure, so I guess they're sticking to it. Sergei Bubka, fine gymnast. He has a psychologist, the same psychologist as Garry Kasparov, the chess champion. And he really is a talent in every respect, but he's certainly in no state of mind to attack this world record. They've done it again. They've done it again. They've pulled the clock on him again. I think he'll be going home very shortly. As Daley Thompson was saying earlier, this young man is such a prestigious talent, he really is. And for the second time, they've played the 2-minute clock on him, and it's totally irrelevant at this stage of the game with the World Championship won.
I think they may be laying down the letter of the law, and this is certainly not within the spirit of the competition. He's plainly won the gold medal. The pressure is off all the other competitors. There is no problem as far as the competition, the crowd or the organisers is concerned.
Now, Paul, let me just break in here, because I've just looked at the scoreboard and there's a 1 on it, which means that they've taken it all back. As you see, he's now getting the first of 3 vaults. The crowd, well over 50,000 in this stadium, all applauding now. And so Sergei Bubka, who's won the psychology battle, he's well trained in that art, I can tell you, is now making his first attempt at 6 meters and 14.
Well, one of the other competitors has just walked up to that timing clock and pushed it over, and the officials pushed it back up again, and it's still ticking away. So, a few mind games going on, but the target, an absolutely unbelievable 35th world record for the world champion 4 times over. Well, I think the troubles of the last 5 minutes or so perhaps got to Bubka after all. But at the moment it does look as though he'll have 2 attempts left. So I think the officials will allow him some time now just to relax. And we saw that first 400-meter heat, the last event of the decathlon. And O'Brien, well, he just pipped Paul Meyer of Germany. And what it in fact means at the end of day 1 is that O'Brien moves back into the lead on 4,598 points, and it couldn't be closer. Well, the whole stadium focusing their attention once again on Sergei Bubka. Remember the target, a shade over 20 feet for a 35th world record. And in metric terms, that means 6 meters 14. Better than the last attempt, but certainly not vaulting as well at this stage in the afternoon as he was when he cleared 6 meters, and that's the leader in the distance.
Berlin Otti, one of the principals in the women's 200 meters final, due off very shortly. Otti still to win the big gold medal. Silver in the 100 meters. Smarting over that defeat, wants to make amends here. And she has got a very tough race on her hands indeed.
So what world record? Was that close? Well, he's won the gold medal. Everybody here in the stadium and watching televisions around the world know what a great athlete he is. He wanted that one. He wanted it badly. He knew he was in good form. But he says thank you. That's the great sportsman he is. 6 meters, a world championship record, and 4 world championships in a row.
So to the women's 200.
To another hearing in the case of John Demjanjuk, who was cleared last month of being the Treblinka death camp guard known as Ivan the Terrible. The Chief Justice has given Nazi hunters 15 days to present a final appeal to retry him on new charges that he'd been a guard at several other death camps.
After 2 hours of deliberation, the Supreme Court agreed once again to delay the release of John Demjanjuk allowing extra time for a case to be presented for a new trial. A victory in the legal small print for those who believe John Demjanjuk, while not Ivan the Terrible of Treblinka, was possibly a guard at another death camp.
There's still a chance that even Demjanjuk can be put on trial for the crimes that he committed in the Sobibor death camp and in Flossenburg, Regensburg, and in Travnicki.
And we hope that at last the court will change its decision and eventually Demjanjuk will have a new trial in Israel and he'll get his punishment in the state of Israel.
The Supreme Court and Israel's Attorney General have already said they don't believe there are grounds for a new trial. This indecision won't add to the reputation of Israel's legal system, but the judges have been under strong emotional pressure. A majority of people in Israel are said to agree that there's sufficient evidence that Demjanjuk should face another trial. The court has already demonstrated that it will take as much time as it wants to consider each and every legal challenge, and that appears to be the case once again today. John Devitt, BBC News, Jerusalem.
At home,
Indeed. Kostovalova of the Czech Republic taking life very easy at the moment as Beverly Grant closes her down. The Russian, Yelena Golosheva, content to sit there. They run the first bend of the second leg in lanes. That's why it's a deceptively long echelon on the first leg. So Cuba run well here. The Jamaicans in second place at the moment. The Russians now closing down. And the Czech Republic in third place. Here's the first changeover. We'll get some idea who is in the lead at this stage. The Russians are Jamaica in second and Cuba in third. That's oh, the Cubans have dropped the baton. They've thrown it off the track. Now, will she get back in? She doesn't know. Why doesn't she run? Oh, I say. Well, Cuba out of it. Russia, Jamaica, the Czech Republic, Ukraine and Switzerland now. Unbelievable. She didn't pick up the baton, go back and run again, come back into the lane and run again, but that's it. They've gone. But meanwhile, the race proceeds. Brzezina, semi-finalist in the 400 meters. Into the straight. Turner of Jamaica. So Russia 1, Jamaica 2, Ukraine 3, the Czech Republic 4, Switzerland 5. Dion Hemmings then for Jamaica, chasing Vera Sokolova of Russia, and the Russian now takes over. Russia 1, Jamaica 2. Two very strong sides, and for the Ukraine, Yelena Nezonkina. These two teams, though, well out in front. Let me remind you, the first three teams go through, plus the two fastest losers. And the Russians will hand over to Tatiana Alexeyeva, who was fourth placer in the 400 meters. And Jamaica take over. Dion Hemmings, sixth in the 400 meter hurdles, has had a good leg, really. She's made them up, what, 4 or 5 meters. So Sandy Richards, bronze medalist in the 400 meters, got an advantage of about 10 meters or so over Alexeyeva. Now, Alexeyeva will have looked and will have seen that there's an easy qualification here. No need to go any faster. The Ukraine in third place, the Czech Republic in fourth, Switzerland in fifth. The Swiss, Hella Burkhardt, better known to you as Helen Barnett. So, Jamaica, a comfortable lead. Very, very comfortable qualification for Sandy Richards. She took the bronze, as I said, in the individual event. Tatiana Alexeyeva is coasting in second place. Jamaica go through. Russia in second. The Czech Republic fighting for the third place, and they're going to hold on for it. Czech Republic third, Switzerland fourth, and the Ukraine fifth, 3:23.83, and that is the fastest time in the world this year. Good, solid run, wasn't it, by the Jamaicans?
18 have already been sent home. Plenty are left. The alley, which runs between the warehouse and the Ukrainian barracks, has the reputation of being a safe zone. That's odd, given that the rest of this area is often under sniper fire from the besieging forces. But then some Ukrainians are said to have black marketeering links with the Bosnian Serb troops surrounding the city. Outside the warehouse, there's a lot of coming and going. This one is curious, an armed man who's not in uniform, a rarity even in Sarajevo. The camera crew spotted one barrel, maybe filled with oil, being loaded up. Where it was headed isn't known. Soon after, a couple of local policemen appeared. They knew the Ukrainians were involved in the black market, though they didn't like the camera crew filming here. Bad soldiers, they said, as the camera continued running.
There is a black mark. Ukraine soldier is bad soldier. Bad thing is the packs of cigarette. He pay a box. He pay a box $11, and he sold here to us for 60 Deutschmarks. It's about $40.
The scale of what's available if you're prepared to deal on the black market is quite extraordinary, given that Sarajevo has been under siege for a year and a half now. The woman who lives in this flat has French wine, tins of petit pois, tins of milk, Ukrainian milk. She's a black marketeer herself and didn't want to be identified.
In January, I went and sold my car for coffee, and I met the head of the Ukrainian stores. We entered like going into any market. There were no restrictions. You wouldn't think this was UNPROFOR. You could buy all the goods you needed. If you have technical goods like televisions, video recorders and cassette players, they're interested. We don't need them. For a television or a video recorder, we get 60 kilograms of coffee beans. They buy anything. They buy gold jewelry. Everything is exchanged for food. I don't know where they get all that food, but they have enormous quantities of food.
The UN, naturally enough, is deeply embarrassed by all these allegations.
Any black marketeering is absolutely intolerable. It's unaccepted, and we will take very severe measures any UNPROFOR people who may be involved in that type of activity.
The fact is, for the UN to send troops from a relatively deprived country like Ukraine to Sarajevo was always going to cause problems. For almost everyone in the former Soviet Union, black marketeering was a way of life, and a long siege offers superb opportunities for crooked dealing. Popular legend in Sarajevo has it that the last Ukrainian battalion went home with 14 million Deutschmarks, nearly £6 million. Last Christmas, when I was in the city, Ukrainian armoured vehicles couldn't go on patrol because the crews had sold the petrol. And there are persistent allegations that the Ukrainians have sold their arms and ammunition. Altogether, then, the black market is the only thing that really works with efficiency and reliability in Sarajevo now, and the city couldn't survive under siege conditions without it. To that extent, you could say, the UN soldiers who sell their supplies are doing the inhabitants a favour. But the money leaves the city for good, and with it goes much of what's left of the UN's reputation there.
Well, that was John Simpson. And with me is the Ukrainian Deputy Foreign Minister, Boris Tarasyuk. Mr. Tarasyuk, this is deeply damaging, isn't it, to your country's reputation?
Well, sadly, if it will be the truth, and the truth could be only set up by the investigation...
Do you doubt it's the truth? Do you doubt it?
Well, I doubt the conclusion that the Ukrainians are the most, the contingent which is engaged in black marketeering.
But you accept that it is engaged in some black marketeering?
Yes, sadly. And moreover, I may say that the leadership, the command of Ukrainian armed forces has investigated and found that 4 servicemen indeed did participate in black marketeering. in trading with cigarettes and 1 in trading with fuel.
Well, 13 have been sent home, haven't they, since the Bosnian struggle began?
I'm talking about 4.
The 4 have been found guilty, 4 have been convicted.
Yes, the 4 which has been found guilty by the Ukrainian command.
Right.
So sadly, like any other person, one can only be embarrassed with what has been indicated here.
How do you explain the way these soldiers must have decided to behave? What made them do it, do you think?
Well, to my mind, like in any other manifestation of life in any given situation, some negative facts might be regrettably being manifested. But I don't think, and I'm sure that this is not the major feature of Ukrainian battalion functioning in Sarajevo.
But is pay a problem? I mean, do you think it is necessary that obviously comparatively poorly paid UN troops, like the Ukrainians, should be paid more, should be given some kind of a UN pay rate to bring them up to the level of other people in the UN forces?
Well, I would not go as far as to this.
Would that remove the temptation?
Side of the
Would
problem.
that remove the temptation?
Probably. One may not reject this, but once again, I would like to stress here that we have quite a number of even written testifies that Ukrainian battalion functions are being highly estimated by the UN command, by the authorities of Bosnia and Herzegovina, by the people of Sarajevo for their assistance and their humanitarian role. You know that our servicemen...
Not much humanitarian about profiteering at the expense of starving people.
I'm not talking about humanitarian...
In general, I understand.
Yes,
I understand.
I'm talking about their functioning.
Sure.
And they paid high price for their functioning. You know that Ukrainian soldiers has lost 5 lives. Well, 5 servicemen has lost their lives.
Indeed. I take it that you will cooperate, will you, with the UN Commission's inquiry into the corruption?
No doubt.
Mr. Deputy Foreign Minister, thank you very much for joining us.
Well.
When our allegations of corruption go wider than the former Yugoslavia, 8 senior UN officials were suspended in July after an inquiry into a contract for helicopters used in peacekeeping operations in Cambodia. In March, a former top UN official, Dick Thornborough, wrote a report saying the UN was almost totally lacking in effective means to deal with fraud, waste and abuse by staff. Earlier, I spoke to Alan Keyes, a former UN ambassador, and currently on an American congressional commission investigating the UN's operations. I asked him if the new UN Commissioner's investigation will get to the bottom of the problem.
Have reached agreement on their long-running dispute over nuclear weapons and the future of the Black Sea Fleet. At a summit meeting in the Crimea, President Boris Yeltsin and Leonid Kravchuk agreed that Ukraine's nuclear warheads would be dismantled in Russia, and the Russians will buy Ukraine's share of the Black Sea Fleet. In return, Russia will provide Ukraine with uranium for its nuclear power stations. The deal must now be ratified by the parliaments of both countries.
2 men. The Ukraine agree the future of the Black Sea Fleet and of hundreds of nuclear warheads. And here, another sign that the... 2 of the biggest unresolved issues following the collapse of the Soviet Union have been settled. The Ukraine has agreed to ship its nuclear warheads to Russia, where they'll be destroyed. And Moscow will also get its share of the Black Sea Fleet. In return, Russia will write off some of the huge debt which is crippling Ukraine's economy. The unexpected breakthrough came during talks between the Russian President Boris Yeltsin and his Ukrainian President counterpart Leonid Kravchuk in Yalta on the Crimean Peninsula. The agreement involves vessels of the former Soviet Navy based at Sevastopol on the Black Sea and nuclear warheads sited across the Ukraine. Andrew Veach reports now on the significance of today's agreement.
350 ships, 70,000 sailors and its own air force.
The Black Sea Fleet, based at Sevastopol, was one of the jewels of the former Soviet Navy. Russia and the Ukraine had agreed to split the fleet, but now with debts for fuel and gas running into trillions of rubles, it seems the Ukraine feels that economic considerations outweigh military advantages. The agreement came when President Yeltsin met Ukraine's President Leonid Kravchuk at Yalta in the Crimea today. President Yeltsin said the cost of Ukraine's share of the fleet would settle part of the country's debt to Russia. It's not clear what that means in terms of cash. But it's the agreement on missiles that will be most welcomed in the West. 176 long-range nuclear missiles were left on Ukrainian soil after the breakup of the Soviet Union. Now the country appears to have agreed to give up its status as a nuclear power.
It does make the world a safer place because it helps to stop the spread of nuclear weapons. Ukraine's missiles were a severe threat to the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty. They were talking about joining the Non-Proliferation Treaty as a transition state and not as a non-nuclear weapon state. And clearly now, if they give all their weapons back to Russia, they can join as a non-nuclear weapon state.
The country's parliament had been determined to retain control over the weapons. There was talk of breaking the launch codes so they could be fired without Moscow's agreement. Under today's deal, the warheads will be shipped to Russia to be dismantled. Russia will pay the Ukraine for the uranium from the warheads. The amount has yet to be determined. President Kravchuk said he had discussed the warheads with Yeltsin and President Clinton of the United States before today's meeting. Details of the agreements on the warheads and the Black Sea Fleet are to be worked out by a joint commission by the end of the month. Also to be settled is the issue of whether Russia will use Sevastopol as a base for the Black Sea Fleet. As it is, Yeltsin appears to have the upper hand. The Ukraine is almost entirely dependent on Russia for its oil, and Russia has cut supplies until the Ukraine pays its enormous debt. That said, today's agreement has removed two major irritants in Ukraine's relationship with both Russia and the United States.
Andrew Veach reporting. Well, joining us now to discuss the importance of today's agreement is our regular commentator on affairs in the former Soviet Union, Peter Frank. Peter, this is much more about economic desperation than about nuclear warheads, isn't it?
Well, it certainly is on the Ukraine side. There's no doubt about it that the economy in the Ukraine is in a truly parlous state. The word which has been bandied around the Ukraine parliament over the last week is catastrophic, with very high rates of inflation, enormous indebtedness, and nobody seeming to know how to box their way out. So there certainly will be economic gains there by having part of its large debt cancelled. But that's not quite the same thing for Russia. There, I think the political gains may well outweigh the economic gains. Indeed, there may even be economic costs for Russia.
Well, I mean, before the breakup, or as the Soviet Union broke up, everyone spoke very hopefully of the Ukraine. Why is the economic crisis even worse than the morass in Russia itself?
Part of the reason, I think, is because in Ukraine they haven't even attempted to begin with some kind of economic reform. At least they've tried in Russia. It hasn't been terribly successful, but I think it's quite an indicator of how it would be if Russia hadn't tried at all. So I think that's part of the reason. And then there's also the inevitable fragmentation of economic relations. That old interdependency that was there in the Soviet Union has been broken down. And because Ukraine is so dependent upon energy supplies from Russia, I think that's made the situation there even worse.
Well, now the phrase is that the missiles are to be returned for disposal in the Soviet Union. In Russia, what will the Russians actually do with this stuff? Will they get rid of it?
I think they will. I think they will get rid of it, and getting rid of it is obviously going to cost them a great deal of money. As I said, I don't think the economic benefits are all that great for Russia, but I think it was very interesting on tonight's Russian television news. Standing there beside Mr. Yeltsin when he made this announcement of the agreement was Mr. Chernomyrdin, the Russian Prime Minister, who'd flown directly from a meeting with Bill Clinton in Washington, directly to the Crimea, and in a way that was a political endorsement for what Yeltsin was doing. That, I think, was a good sign.
People were very worried about the dispute over the fleet. I mean, how serious a problem was it? How big a relief that it's been resolved?
It was the kind of trigger that somebody could somehow let go at any moment if they weren't careful. If passions got out of hand, if, for example, some kind of maverick commander were to do something silly, like trying to take part of the fleet away from the base in the Crimea, that could certainly have created some kind of major crisis between the two new countries.
Peter Frank, thank you very much indeed for joining us. And a reminder of this evening's main headlines so far.
A plea to NATO in the toughest terms yet against letting countries from the old Warsaw Pact join it. His spokesman said it would infuriate the Russian army and promote negative nationalist tendencies. There's a NATO summit next week, and a senior official said today it'll signal that it's prepared in principle to open up to new members, but not yet. It'll first offer a partnership for peace, open to all its old enemies, including Russia. The former Soviet Republic of Lithuania, Poland, Hungary, the Czech Republic and Slovakia all want full membership of NATO now. In this special report from Poland, our diplomatic editor James Mates explains why.
Polish tanks manoeuvre through a snowstorm on their northern plain. For decades they've been training to fight NATO in the west. Now they're looking anxiously eastwards, fearful of what's happening in Russia. They have now freed themselves from Soviet domination, but they're afraid that without Western guarantees, they could still fall victim to the Russians or to a host of territorial squabbles on their frontiers. This is the border with Russia. Just a couple of hundred yards over here is the border with Lithuania. Many Poles still live on the wrong side of that border. In the 1930s, Britain and France went to war to defend Poland's borders. Neither they nor the Americans will want to make such a commitment again in the 1990s. Poland knows all about unstable neighbours. 4 years ago it had just 3, East Germany, Czechoslovakia and the Soviet Union. Now it has 7, some new states, some recreated. Dangerous, say the Poles. Indeed, says NATO, which is why it wants to stay well clear. Add to that the rise of Russia's extreme right-winger, Vladimir Zhirinovsky, who made it quite clear today what he thinks of the Poles.
We don't care about them. They threw out our troops. They vandalized our monuments, so we now spit on Poland.
With views like that winning widespread support, many in the West are warning that to expand NATO into the former Warsaw Pact would only make life harder for Russian moderates.
I think that if you include all the Eastern European countries in NATO, the obvious conclusion is that it's against the Russians. Otherwise, what is the purpose of it? And I am doubtful whether, at the present state of affairs in Russia, that's a very wise or sensible thing to do.
That, say Poland's leaders, is to ignore the lessons of the 1930s. They're still haunted by memories of a war in which 1 in every 5 Poles died. They fervently believe that pandering to the Russians now could be as dangerous as pandering to Hitler was back then.
It's the same short-sightedness that ended very badly in 1939. The same kind of game is being played, and it's likely that this game could also end badly. There is Russia, which is making threats. There is the West, which is frightened. And we are in the middle.
Those who run his defense policy have no doubt about the danger they believe they're in through accident of geography.
We are sitting in the center of Europe, and this is not the very safe place here on our continent, and we must work for our security and sovereignty.
Poland will get Western military cooperation, joint exercises and the like. British troops will train here with them in the summer. But they don't hide their disappointment that to the West now, only the Russians seem to matter. James Mates, News at 10, Poland.
Now tonight's main news again.
A breakthrough in East-West defence cooperation. But other frictions remain, especially over the question of NATO membership. Here's our Moscow correspondent, Julian Mannion.
These are the missiles that today's hard-won deal is all about. Left behind in their silos in the collapse of the Soviet Union, they have been the focus of a determined American effort to have them removed and destroyed. The Ukrainian President Leonid Kravchuk has now put his authority on the line by promising to dismantle the weapons in spite of opposition from vocal Ukrainian nationalists, who have started to see the missiles as some kind of guarantee against Russian aggression. Last November, the Ukrainian parliament expressed reservations about the disarmament process, and it seems that President Kravchuk will now have to try to win them over. The reward he will be able to promise is a reported £8 billion from the United States and supplies of cheap oil and gas from Russia. If the weapons really are destroyed, it will remove one of the most potent and nagging threats left by the fall of the Soviet Union. The Ukraine does not have the ability to fire the missiles. Only Moscow headquarters has the secret codes. But Russian experts have claimed that there is a growing risk of a nuclear disaster in the poorly maintained facilities, and the possibility that the bankrupt Ukraine might try to become a full-fledged nuclear power has threatened to undermine the international effort to prevent the proliferation of nuclear weapons.
The deal with the Ukraine will be welcomed here in Moscow, where President Clinton arrives on Wednesday. But his offer of a partnership for peace to the countries of Eastern Europe that were once allied with Russia in the now defunct Warsaw Pact